Trying to figure out the color, but I thought it was Cleveland.
Yeah,
It's
Cleveland
live,
Indians.
Julie,
What?
it says we're live.
Yep, it just went live. So
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have Doc Fellner, Mike Reichert, myself. Did you guys see the minutes of the previous meetings?
Did I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Mike.
He's froze.
Oh. Are you unfroze now? Dr. Fellner made the motion to approve the minutes. Do you second it?
Second.
All in
Okay.
favor? Aye. Do we have any amendments to the published agenda? Do I have an approval of the agenda as published or amended?
I make that motion to approve the agenda as published.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, tonight we're going to be talking about, we want to talk about AMP-T first.
Sure.
It's there on here. That works.
So, Mayor,
Well, I saw Harry Phillips, Mark. I don't know if Ryan Dolan is.
Ryan's on.
Yes, I'm on there.
I guess what I would do is have Ryan give it the 5-minute version of what is a relatively complicated subject, but I think he can summarize it and then we could have a discussion about it. Essentially, to set the table, AMP has formed a new operating entity, I believe is the best way to describe it, and they are acquiring from their members the various cities' distribution system. And the advantage to us,
Transmission.
that would be our substations and the 69 kV high wire that connects from our connection with First Energy and then connects our various substations. So we would agree to, what we'll likely do is bid that out, and hopefully AMP-T would be a successful bidder. And then in that way, they could use our capacity charge money that goes to JPM. We could use that, or they could use that to finance the upgrade. So I think that's the main, the element of allowing AMP-T to acquire our distribution system through a competitive selection process. And then the advantage is that they can use our capacity charge in this ATSI area to capitalize it rather than just our 6,000 customers. So, Ryan, I don't know, I probably took 3 minutes introducing you, but go ahead.
Yeah.
You have a chance and clarify or elaborate, please.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks, Mayor, for the introduction. Just to, I guess, set the stage. My name is Ryan Dolan. My background is in transmission planning. I do engineering studies and very on transmission systems throughout the United States that are impacting our members. My previous role coming to AMP, I was with American Electric Power doing the same work under the transmission planning world as well. So to kind of recap what the mayor hit on, basically AMP a couple years ago, about late 2017, early 2018, formed what is now known as AMP Transmission. The prime goal or mission for AMP Transmission is to own, operate, and maintain transmission facilities on behalf of AMP members. So the key thing here is historically the AMP members in their, let's say, transmission level voltage or facilities have been treated in essence as not part of a zonal transmission area or territory. And right now, today, the galleon system sits in what is known as the ATSI zone. So for many of you that are probably used to pay or may have properties somewhere else, the ATSI, you can picture in essence is Toledo Edison, Ohio Edison, all those typical organizations that you may know through commercials or something on the television. So in essence, what happens is today, whenever, let's say an organization like Galleon has to build a 69 kV facility or a transmission facility to support their own internal load, that cost right now is borne 100% by the Galleon customers. Whereas if ATSI, for instance, or First Energy were to build the exact same project, they would actually socialize that cost across the entire rate base. So they would charge Galleon part of that cost. They would charge all the other municipal customers part of that cost. And then some of that cost would also go to their customers. So in essence, the reason why AMP-T was formed was in essence to give our members the same benefit that the ATSI or First Energy operating companies are receiving today. So we have been formed. We went through all the necessary processes. We've been formally approved by the Federal Electric Regulatory Commission, FERC. We have an established rate, and we have actually done a number of these acquisitions over the last year. And we continue to negotiate and work with members on their behalf to basically develop and revitalize their systems, similar to what we have initially proposed for Galleon. So kind of the gist of the proposal is that we would basically come in, you guys would go through a competitive selection process. We would propose to purchase your facilities. We would make a cash payment to you guys. A part of those, we typically offer what is known as O&M. So in essence, we enter into an agreement that allows your guys' crews and workers to continue to maintain and operate the facilities on the behalf of AMP, and then we pay you guys in essence for allowing your workers to do that for us. Plus, we add a fee on every year, and that fee is typically $10,000, and we pay you guys $10,000 just simply for offering that service for us. Even if you guys do no work that year for us, simply for being there and being on call to respond to an outage of those facilities, we pay you. So the gist of that is basically now Galleon and in the local municipality electric system is now recovering costs that previously they had not been able to recover, and that their customers were the sole bearers of that cost. And then it takes that cost and socializes that cost through a larger zone. So in essence, instead of you guys paying 100%, you're only paying, I believe, if I recall your guys' load ratio share, about 1/4%. So it's a significant financial swing in many instances. So also combined with this, some of our members, when they open up their RFPs, they also put stipulations on items they would like to see or issues they would like to have addressed in the following subsequent years after that, let's say, agreement was reached. So one example I would give for a frame of reference is the Village of Brewster. They recently went through an RFP process similar to what you guys would have to go through due to the requirements from the state of Ohio. They opened up their RFP, and as part of their RFP, they actually requested that a second transmission delivery be brought into the village so that they have 2 feeds into the village rather than only 1. This provides redundancy and additional reliability to the community in the event that that single feed were to go out, they have a second feed into the area. So we often would support that our members, when they go through these RFP processes, put things like that O&M as well as any items they would like addressed over a subsequent following years into their RFP. So that's the gist of it. As a frame of scope of your guys' system, your system is currently about 7.3 miles of 69 kV transmission. It operates in a loop. So it basically encompasses the entire community. It has, I believe you have about 6 to 8 substations, depending on how they're configured and how you want to look at them a little bit. So in essence, we would propose to purchase anything that is operating at 69 kV and above. So a key thing I do want to note, I don't want anybody to get confused here. Our proposal is not to purchase your distribution system. Our goal is only to own and operate transmission. We are only here to support our members and their ongoing goals, which is to own, operate, and maintain distribution facilities that directly serve the customers in their local community. So we are only here to support your guys' effort, and we are not here to purchase anything that would be distribution related. If there's any frame of questions, I don't know how many of you are familiar with electrical transmission substations, but there's a transformer that steps down the voltage from 69 kV to whatever your distribution voltages are, which I believe, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you're 1247. So we would basically stop our purchases at that transformer. So you guys would keep the ownership of the transformer and all the distribution facilities, and we would take ownership of the transmission facilities. And then, as we've talked, I've talked with the mayor and a number of the council, the board members here. We would also probably take on a program, a systematic program, to go through that 7.3 miles and the substations and basically revitalize those, bring them up to current day standards. So in essence, you guys would be operating facilities that are just like the facilities you see up the road that First Energy and everybody else are operating. So basically newer facilities that are, we'll say, of newer age and design. So with that, I'll pause and open up for questions.
Hey, Mark, we're
Yes.
getting some questions because Justin Humberger shared it to talk about Galleon. They kind of want to know what we're talking about. So they're all asking, and Justin just texted me to maybe interrupt and see if you could kind of say what's going on, because they think, are we selling the whole system? Or they're not understanding. So they're
No, what,
Yeah.
the only thing AMP-T is interested in is a transmission, which is 7 miles, like Ryan said. It surrounds, goes from Dorset, Primrose, to Heisey Park, to Railroad Street. That's the only thing. The distribution is still going to be ours.
So if you would like, I do have a diagram that I can share on my screen if you guys would appreciate that.
That might be good. Yeah.
Okay. I will go ahead and try to share my screen if you
We'll
get.
have to allow you. Maybe let me see.
Yep.
Participants. You're Ryan Moore. Oh, that's me. Hold on. You moved on me. I can make you a co-host right now, and that would allow you to share your screen, I think. So.
Okay.
Okay. I think that'll allow you, won't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
All right. And bear with me. I am pulling up my screen. So are you guys able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
And okay. So in essence, as one of the members was noting here, you guys have, this is basically a one-line diagram of your guys' 69 kV transmission system. You guys are currently fed from this tap here, as well as this tap here off the same transmission line. So a key thing to point out here is you guys have 2 deliveries, but right now you guys are not operating those two deliveries independent, and there's no sectionalizing in between those. So we would seek to basically increase the reliability of the system by installing sectionalizing as well, so that any one transmission line outage would not interrupt your guys' delivery or your service to your customers. So we would propose to by upgrading those sectionalizing schemes to ensure that any one line outage does not take anything out. So what I have highlighted in red here is basically the 69 kV transmission lines and facilities. And here, at the square boxes here are the breakers, and lines and the names are basically representative of the substations as well. So as a frame of reference, these are kind of a general location of your guys' substations as well. So if anybody's interested, you guys can let us know. We can help, provide some additional information if you guys would like one-on-one conversations with us as well too. So these are basically the substations and the geographic layout of your guys' facilities. So as I noted, we would only be focusing on 69 kV and above facilities. So in this instance, only the 69 system. We would not be proposing to purchase any of the distribution system from the community of Gallion.
Mark
Go ahead.
said, I'm sorry, this is Tom Fellner. Mark, you've said all along about that system and the necessary upgrades that have been needed, correct?
Yes, it would probably cost us, I don't know, probably $10 million to upgrade that 69, at least.
Yeah, right now, the going price of rebuilding a transmission line to current modern day standards is going to be roughly around 1.1 to 1.2 million a mile. So 7 miles extrapolated plus the associated improvements that we think what you guys would benefit from, which includes the additional sectionalizing. So I think the $10 million number is a pretty good, ballpark figure there.
I think it's a really good idea.
That sectionalizing also, we might have 2 feeds, but as he pointed out, they're off the same line. So that line goes down. Having a second feed does us no good some of the time, right?
Some of the time.
There are occasions if the tree falls in the right direction, maybe we'd be okay. But so that, that's an important thing to help modernize the system. I think I'm going to speak for the people on Facebook and our utility customers is, the bottom line is price reflective in our utility bill. And I know that's a very loaded question and I don't expect a specific answer. My personal feeling is that co-joining in partnership, if AMP-T happens to get it, is going to be a benefit. The costs that we're already paying as a city on our utility bill, if you come in and look at it, it's not just the price of power, it's transmission lines, all of that maintenance, external of the city. We don't generate our own power. Some of the arguments a long time ago were that, well, we're our own power system. Well, those days of our coal-fired, generating system is long gone. So it's a whole different ballgame, and our system is aging. So but I don't think personally I think this is our money being better spent to help us upgrade this all-important 69 system. But I know the customers are going to ask price point and utility.
Yeah. So what I typically provide information in this regards is, so when you right now these costs are being booked under your guys' distribution cost, right? So the cost to maintain these facilities, if you have to replace a pole, et cetera, that goes solely to your customers today. In this situation, once those facilities are operated as part of the network transmission system, that cost is socialized through a larger zone, right? So if you compare the net of the two, typically, and this is, I have yet to see anything otherwise, we do not see really a net increase to your guys' costs. Actually, really what we're doing is we're taking a maintenance burden away from you guys, and we're actually compensating you for the maintenance you used to do on those facilities, but now we're compensating you for it. So really, if you look at the two as a net, I believe Gallion is in the positive.
I agree. And, some of those maintenance things that you were referring to, if we have, that won't affect the maintenance that we do internally. As you said, we will still be responsible for that. But if we have a distribution problem, we have to call an outside source anyway. Isn't that right, Mark?
Well,
if we have a problem on the 69,
Problem, Doc. we had a problem with our transmission line, we would probably rely on outside, depending
Right.
on it.
Exactly.
The distribution is what we do. That's our daily bread and butter.
Exactly.
Mark, I didn't mean to step on you. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I was trying to allude to, is that we're still going to have the responsibility of our distribution system. But if we do have a problem currently, we've got to call outside anyway. AEP's got to come in. Somebody has to come in. And this way, AMP-T is the entity that we're going to rely on. I feel.
Yep. Yeah. So we would do that a number of different ways. Either work to equip and train your guys so they could do that work themselves, or we would also work to basically set it up with our services providing that as well. Our goal really at the end of this is to put the member in a situation where they can do and maintain as much as possible for them locally, because we want to keep their guys employed, with work, etc. So really at the end of the day, our main focus has typically tried to be get you guys to the point, or get your crews, etc., to the point where they have the ability to maintain those facilities. And if we have to do, bring in our options as well, we can do that. But typically our goal is to make sure that you guys, your guys are able to maintain it, because that means that they can do the repairs, let's say in the middle of the night, if there is an outage. So it's a process. Things don't happen overnight. So, we're working through those with various members, but yeah, I think it would be definitely a better coordination, because you would have a partner in that coordination effort.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, may I ask a question or a clarifying point?
Go ahead.
Yeah. The expression socialize does describe it, but I don't want people to hear that term.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Pink or red kind of conspiracy.
No,
what happens now, and Ryan explained it a couple times real well. And I didn't think to have in front of me or give to Julie a copy of our.
I have it there.
But our bill from AMP has the line item on it that is our capacity charge. That is, I guess you're going to pull it up. No.
Yeah. So from this frame of reference, to better understand what we mean by zonal cost socialization, and I hate to say it, that's the concept, but in essence, what it is
sharing.
They're mutualized, right? Their costs are mutualized in that area, that little whatever you want to call it, peach color.
Yeah.
So we pay in. Here's the key point, I think, on that. We pay into that now every single month, but we don't have access to it to be approved by the regional transmission organization, that JPM. And if we go to AMP-T, AMP-T will be able on our behalf to petition or make requests for the kind of capital improvements that we would otherwise would be our next capital investment. I think Mark absolutely believes this. He's 100% right. That's the next big investment that needs to be done within our system. We would, as Ryan said, 6,000 customers would have to pay for that, versus AMP-T going to that mutualized cost and being able to get our share of the money we've been paying in with no access to.
Yep.
So I don't know if that's saying it a little bit different, but maybe that helps.
Yeah, in essence, like if you want to think of it as a geographical area, if you see up here in the map, that peach colored area at the top of Ohio and it comes down a little bit towards Dayton, that is what is known as the ATSI zone, right? That's the zone you guys are currently in today. Your facilities, once integrated into the zone, they would become, and the cost to own, operate, and maintain those facilities are paid for by every customer that's located in that geographic footprint, in essence, versus just the customers in your local zone or local community. So in essence, I know socialization has a bad connotation sometimes, but in this one, really, it's in essence, you pay your fair share of utilization. And the thought process is when these are operating as network transmission facilities, an electron can flow from point A to point B, and that point A to point B in that system can be a sizable distance, but that electron is indiscriminate, really. So in essence, it's kind of the concept of the beneficiary pays. Whoever would be utilizing that would be paying for those facilities. In this situation, your facilities and our plan would be fully networked and operating as part of the larger transmission system. So the ATSI transmission zone would all bear that cost versus just your customers. The other thing I do want to point out a little bit too is, and a reason I bring this up is because the mayor has been, very active in communicating with us. We have had a number of members come to us here recently who are seeking to develop economic development opportunities. So they're meeting with, developers who are looking to build various things, data centers, greenhouses, et cetera. Oftentimes, those new loads or economic development activity require new infrastructure, and they need larger infrastructure because they are larger loads. So this is another also mechanism for you guys and for you guys to work with to, in essence, have somebody to go with you, go hand in hand, side by side, to attract those economic development opportunities to come to your guys' local community. And those costs to develop that transmission infrastructure, again, is socialized. So it's a really good and valuable economic engine for some of our communities. And we have started to see a lot of those opportunities come to fruition now.
Hey, Ryan, Mike Richard, on this, I think it would be a great benefit to our community because, as you mentioned and the mayor's mentioned, that with you folks taking and purchasing that system from us, you're going to be doing the upgrades. So in other words, we're getting a upgraded system as opposed to what we have now. Question, if we would go with this program and go through the process and everything, do you have a window on like a time frame of upgrades, or is that still too far in the future?
Well, what I would recommend is you guys, since you guys are going the RFP route, I would recommend, if you guys have a certain window you guys would like to see it in, you maybe lay that out. I think a thing we have to think about here is reliability overall to the system on a day-to-day operational perspective. So the key thing is here, you can't take on too much too quick because you can't do everything in one day because people would be without power. So it would be a process overall. I would say within probably a 10-year period, I think is a good frame of reference for everything. But really ideally from the get-go, we would start doing those incremental plans and working to execute those incremental plans. And we would obviously prioritize with your guys' local crews to identify what are the worst facilities that need to be addressed first. And that's really how we would look at it is we would really work hand in hand, side by side with you guys to identify that. A good frame of reference where you would see significant headway be the 4 to 5 year period where you would see significant activity being executed. That is the sectionalizing upgrades and a good amount of pole replacements on that system and reconfiguring. So I think the 5 to 10 year time frame is really where I would put you at.
Thank you.
The one thing about the 69, it's the heart of the system. If it goes down, we're down.
Yes.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
People on Facebook, because Justin they're wanting to know how it would affect their utility bill.
So
it should not affect the utility bill.
Correct. The only net is
That's who
the,
we're paying the transmission money to.
so the key thing is the billing is you guys get billed on that zonal rate, right? So that zonal rate does not change. So you're not in essence going from paying an ATI, then like First Energy to now paying AMP. You're paying for the whole zone, right? So you're paying for your sliver of that regardless. The key though is where it could impact your rates is what ultimately is determined as the book value of the facility and what you guys sell at those facilities or assets at. Those could be utilized whatever way you guys choose, and that really up to the local community. But we would not see any or project to see any increase in your guys' bill that would be substantial. Now, a key thing I do want to point out is those costs to have those facilities are now being put into a zonal rate. So they're in essence sitting in your distribution bucket today. Once they're integrated in network, they're in a transmission rate. So, it's, I can't even really quantify, but I would say it's so minuscule that you really see any cost increase at all, because the net of not having to do the O&M and pay those costs on a day in, day out basis versus now some costs going into the zonal rate is more than a wash.
And reliability.
Yes, that too. So long story short, I know it's been long-winded. We would not expect to see really any increase in your costs.
It's pretty complicated, and the words do make a difference. If anyone who wanted Facebook or anyone who wanted to see a copy of our bill, I'm sure we would figure out how to get that to you.
Yep.
Our transmission charge and congestion charges that you hear a lot about as when we talk rates, those will still be there in our bill. Where we'll get relief from is that capacity charge that we pay, and that changes as the cost that JPM. That's where that money is derived from. Is that right, Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, so if you took a look at the bill, you'd see that capacity charge number on there. It's that number that we pay into, but get nothing out of. And I wish I had a better memory. It is several, it can be close to a third of our overall cost of power, the capacity charge.
Right.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
the key thing to note there is that cost, the cost you're incurring, right? You're incurring 100% of that cost today for those assets. After this transaction, you guys are only incurring 0.18% of those costs of those assets, because that is the load, your load ratio. They call it load ratio share. So your percentage of that load that is in that, let's say, ATSI transmission zone. So in essence, you are lowering your cost of owning, operating, and maintaining those facilities. And that is in essence going to impact bills overall.
So the other part of that then is that this committee knows, and all of council knows, that with this as not an alternative present, the next thing we were going to look at to improve in our system were these 69 lines, the poles, and any kind of substation work. And we were always talking about when we get our debt paid off, I think in 2023, one goes away, I think 2021, two of those large debts go away. So conceivably, if we go this route, as we finish paying off the debt for the various upgrades of our distribution system, that's what we just completed, all that borrowing, phases 1 through 5, I think, Mark, wasn't there 5 phases?
Yes.
We'll be paying for that for a couple more years. When that's done, our next capital lift would have been what Ryan and AMP-T are proposing, they come in, buy that from us, agree by contract to replace it over, I think I heard, a 5 to 10 year logical period. And we don't have to go back into debt. That's another important concept. So the question back, will this, because it's a bottom line question, my rate's going to go up or not?
Yep.
Implementing this will give us a cushion against other rate increases that may happen to our cost of power.
Yep.
I think we all, without complicating, but our hydropower is putting pressure on that cost of power. This, in an indirect sense, would take some of that rate pressure away by allowing us to get something for those capacity charges that we pay, whether we like it or not. So I hope that explains it. That issue of, will it increase rates? No, it could help cushion us from future rate increases.
It's a very good way of putting it.
Right? I want to try one more thing, if I might, Mark, and that's to explain a little bit more how the arrangement would have our crews called out. And what we would try to do in our RFP is to, I think, do some things like establish, if there's an outage in that 69 system, the successful bidder must be able to respond within 1 hour or 2 hours, some time period. Because what we wouldn't want is to have one of AMP-T's competitors, other big investor powers. I'm concerned about them getting it. We have a big storm comes through, it knocks out our 69. We call First Energy and they say, well, you know, sorry about your luck. There's these other communities that have had similar problems and we'll get there as we can. Versus if it were to happen here, we would have our maintenance crews on board and they could respond like they do right away in the case of a squirrel that got fried at the substation on the lead in part of it. Yep. The lead out of the substation, that would be ours, correct, Ryan?
Yeah, that's correct. You guys would still own the distribution lines and the transformer. So going back to the key is how we structure these partnerships with our members is we try to make sure that they are equipped and capable to maintain the facilities going forward. So whatever, so that would allow them to respond. And then if we have to bring in additional aid, we bring in additional aid.
But what's really cool about that, and it's a little bit of a long explanation, is that right now, though, we're paying all those as sunk costs. All those staffers, we're paying 100%. And when there's an outage, they go out, they determine where it's at, and they fix it. What we'll be able to do now is the call out will happen. We'll go out. If they identify it's in the distribution system, it's still our cost. If it's in the transmission system, it becomes a cost that AMP-T will bill our people for.
No.
So that has the effect of lowering our total out of pocket on, let's say we designate a specific crew that responds to all the transmission outages. Mm-hmm. Any one of those that we would have, their cost could be charged back to AMP-T. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I just want to make sure I clarify that is we would not bill you guys. You guys would bill us, and we would. So in essence, you guys get compensated for those hours, whereas before, and then you guys would have to bill your customers. In essence, you're billing us, we pay you, and then we bill the larger zone. Is what it comes down to.
Right, that is a better way of saying it. We're already billing our customers for them to be available and respond for any kind of outage or maintenance thing. So,
yep,
I think that's once you get how that works, you'll see it's not, it's not all that glitters is gold kind of fallacy, but it's something that is important to note. If we have a bad year with a lot of outages to the transmission facilities, then we would see a lot more coming in from that billing. But in an ordinary year, things would go right along ratepayers wouldn't see a difference. And the utility itself wouldn't see any additional income.
Yeah. And the other side of things I do want to point out too a little bit is there is a mechanism of hedging risk a little bit here that I think is worth noting. If you think about the system, your guys' system has some age. There is some worries about some of the poles, life expectancy, stuff like that. If something like a tornado hits tomorrow, right, and takes out all those poles, those, in essence, Galleon has to figure out today what to do about that, right? Whereas tomorrow, or if we're under AMP-T, if tornado hits those, we're going to have, poles or access to poles. We'll get those poles in, work with your crews, work and bring in outside, rebuild that line, put it back up in the air. And you guys aren't taking on that cost burden, right? That's our cost burden for you guys, in essence, to do. So the point of where I'm going with this is, since the system has a little bit of age to it, there is a hedging that is provided too. That if something catastrophic were to happen and all of a sudden you would have to dump a whole bunch of money into it, and under an AMP-T route, you wouldn't have to do that.
So last thing I want to say until there are some more questions or we decide next steps. This week's outage happened on the north side of town. That would have had, what we're talking about would have had no impact either way. That was a squirrel on a distribution line, not a transmission line, and it it caused that outage. That's why once it was identified, it was back up relatively quickly. But a lot of the north end woke up, I think, Monday morning with no power. And the one questioner I know lives in that area of town that was out. So
7
anyway.
o'clock.
Yeah, yeah. But it was
Right
out
now
a short time, and that's more of a commercial about why you have muni power than whether or not you want your transmission facilities owned by AMP or by us.
Yep.
So
Right now, people
Anyways.
don't know if there's any like tax increases and stuff, and I know this is an enterprise zone, the enterprise fund, so our taxes don't go in there anyway. It's all funded by the electrical system. So
no, it doesn't. I guess I would answer the question as it doesn't have an impact on taxes. And it can only have a positive cushioning impact on rates. It won't necessarily lower rates, but it gives us a chance to avoid, as I said a minute ago, I imagine it's $6 or $7 million, Mark, for rebuilding $1 million a mile plus whatever sub.
Yeah.
Have
Roughly 10.
10 million.
Yep.
So our next dive into the debt markets, seeing if we could get somebody to buy our bonds, or revenue bonds, would be a $10 million hit. That probably would increase rates if we had to borrow 10 million to upgrade it on our own with our own 6,000 customers, rather than mutualizing the risk. I have to work on Ryan on.
We'll say sharing cost burden.
Sharing costs. He doesn't like mutualize any better. So, all right. But I hope that answers the question for the viewers.
I got
listeners.
a question for Tom and for Ryan. We've been talking about this for a while. How close are we to an RFP?
Well, I think the answer to that is, and I don't see Thomas on the gallery, sample resolutions were sent from AMP's general counsel a period of time ago. I would say a couple of weeks ago, maybe. And Director of Law Palmer is looking at that agreement and checking with some other communities to get examples of what we would put out as this request for proposal. So to answer the question in time period, I would hope if council likes this, we get some feedback as a result of this committee meeting, that we could be looking at an ordinance by September, if probably not August, but let's say September, that would select from maybe just one bidder, but other, maybe a small pool of proposers that they provide that service. So it would start in September, could be hammered out by the end of the year, would be my most optimistic time frame.
Okay, thanks.
Do you agree, Ryan? Is that
Yeah, so
doable?
what we've typically seen with other members is usually they open up for a 1 to 2 month, typically around 1 to 2 month period for the RFP responses, etc. From there, then depending on the various council rules, usually it's a 3 reads. So be in it a month and a half, 2 months, let's say, for that, and then about a month for it to go in effect. So I think the end of the year would be a good time frame of reference for this. Yes.
Hey, there's other, Mark, you remember from the initial brief, there's another pathway that some communities are going if they have a CIC or a port authority. Council has given the transmission part of their system to the port or the CIC, and in that way they could do a different selection process. It would be less of a competitive bidding and more of a selection of the preferred vendor. I think, Mark, I'll give you credit or blame for this. I think what we thought when we talked about it initially is we're asking the port to do a lot of things right now, and stepping in to kind of pinch hit in ownership of the electric transmission part of our system. It seemed like asking them to do something maybe overwhelming. And then the last part of it is it really, the advantage of doing that is that you would skirt around competitive bidding. And I don't think that's probably the best course to go. And I think we'll have enough control over the selection of the preferred proposer that we don't have to just skirt around competitive bidding.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So take a little longer to bid it out this way, but I think we have more expertise in this area at City Hall than one could expect the Port Authority to have 6 months into their existence.
Right. Anybody else have any questions for these gentlemen?
Well, I don't know if Thomas is on. Is he just a passive viewer tonight, Julie?
No, he's not on.
Okay, well, we'll talk to him first thing in the morning. Julie will as well if the committee wants us to move this to the top of the priority and be able to hit that end of 2020 sort of target deadline.
I think it's really important to get moving ahead with this, just because our system is aged.
Absolutely.
69, not the distribution.
We need to move ahead. I agree, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with you too, Mark, that like you say, our system is aged. This is a great opportunity to get that process going with really no cost to us as a community. So yeah, I'm all in for moving ahead with this.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing just to make sure the community a little bit of insight. When everybody says the system is aged, Galion is not unlike the rest of the country. The rest of the country has the exact same issues we're dealing with. And, we have other information, but, the AEPs, First Energies of the world, they are doing this exact same thing because they have the exact same situations. So I want to make sure that the community knows that this is a very common thing throughout the United States right now. And I don't want anybody to think that, like the system wasn't taken care of. The reason why it is lasted this long is because it was taken care of. You guys have actually gotten a lot more life out of your facilities than one would typically expect. So, kudos to you guys, but this is pretty consistent, or galleon situation is pretty consistent throughout the U.S.
So I guess there it is, Tom. I guess.
Yeah, I think we'll talk to Thomas and stay tuned. I think we can talk about it in upcoming council meetings until you have an ordinance to discuss. And then, as Ryan said, it wouldn't necessarily have to go 3 readings, but if it, you want to make sure that the kinds of questions that came in tonight get answered, by different utility customers and concerned citizens. So
Right.
we'll get moving on if that's the wish, committee's wish.
I think that's a consensus.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions going on about monopolies and stuff right now on the things.
About
They'll
what?
Understand all that.
About what, please?
About monopolies and, and. that
So,
kind of
so
stuff.
I will say, just going back to that point, we are, new kids on the block. We are kind of on the other side of that. We are a nonprofit. Yeah, I want to make that clear. We are a public power. We are owned by municipal members of AMP. So nothing we do is from a monopolistic standpoint.
Right. That's what I wanted
Public
them to
power.
understand.
Yeah, I think the other part about it is that what's abusive to the allocation of scarce resources is the way that munis in ATSI or munis in any of these territories don't have access for the money that they pay in. That's a distortion and an abuse. So I really feel strongly it allows us to have access to something that we pay each and every month. And what we've seen just in the last handful of years is that this capacity charge, although it has gone down recently, it looks like future auctions for that capacity where that money's raised, looks like that unit cost is going to go up. So what we pay now is likely to go up, if anything, and we'll continue not to get, we're not even allowed to make application for those funds that we pay into. So that's a real key point to get through, I think, to make sure that as far as, I don't know, we'll give a basic quiz on monopolies, and then those people who get an A on the quiz, we'll give them advanced questioning rights or something. But
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. I can't see the question, so I don't want to criticize them too much, but yeah, the residual, I don't trust anything related with AMP. I think there's a certain number of our residents that need to get over that and substitute their rage from 5-6 years ago. Find something else to focus on, because AMP's not the bully or the bad guy in this in any way.
Right.
I like to state it this way is, I work in the wire side of the business, so I only do God's work.
Hey, Mark, one more thing. I know we're eating up a lot of time, but if you look recently, people who are concerned and have some sense of the AMP, the major AMP customers or players, AMP Ohio, they'll see that some of the major sort of front-running communities that have a lot of staff knowledge and talent are beginning to look at this carefully. I understand Orville is looking at it, and
Yep.
Napoleon's already gone in. So some of the communities that have larger loads and that are, I think, have more knowledge, expertise in their management side are moving this direction. So it's, we're not out on the very tip of the spear. We're in the forefront of AMP communities, but what we're doing is trying to see what other communities are doing and then fashion our agreement like some of the other major AMP Ohio players have been doing.
Yeah, so as a frame of reference, Napoleon, Wadsworth, Amherst, we're about to close with Brewster in August 1. Those are like the 4 right off the bat, but there are a whole bunch of number of other entities or members that we're working with as well. Like
What about Bowling Green, Ryan?
Bowling Green, we actually are doing a project right now. We have an RFP out for them right now. We have not gone the route of purchasing their whole system, but they did need system reinforcements. So we went that route. Their system is I would say fairly new. They've had a lot of load growth that's required them to invest in it. So they don't necessarily have, like, let's say an infrastructure burden that they're sitting on. But what they were dealing with is that they were having a lot of issues that when First Energy would take out one of their feeds, they would actually have to separate their system and radialize, so put all their customers on one line. And that was causing a lot of issues for them. So they actually are partnering with us to build a new substation, bring another feed into the community. So long story short, they haven't sold anything, but we are already partnering with them on that stuff.
What about Orville, Ryan? I'd heard that.
We are working through Orville right now. I will say that, we're just working through the due diligence process. They don't have to do an RFP. Have to because of I believe they're a charter. But
Yes.
Irregardless, we're working through that process with them. We're kind of very much, hand in hand, lockstep with them. I believe we would be looking at similar timeframes with them as well as Galleon. We're a lot further ahead though with them. It's just theirs is I don't know how to put this. They have 138 facilities, and anything above 100 kV comes additional compliance requirements for they call it NERC. And that actually requires 24/7 operation centers, a whole bunch of compliance requirements. So those things usually take a lot more time.
Okay, does anybody have any other? I sure appreciate you guys coming explaining this, and I hope a lot of people heard it enough that we can get feedback to see, what the consensus is.
I will note is if there are any questions that you guys receive or want follow up on following this, we're perfectly happy coming back, but then we're also perfectly happy fielding those questions through email, whatever be your preferred method of communication. Just let us know, and we're looking forward to working with your guys' community.
Okay, thanks again for coming, you guys.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is, you want to do the holiday rate first, Storm?
Yeah, and then Nikki is the one that we'll have her present last on the sewer study. She has a little bit more knowledge than I do, certainly.
You can get in. So
What's that?
can
Yeah.
you talk on our mic now?
All I wanted to do is just remind the committee that at the end of this month, that 90-day storm sewer holiday, the ordinance will expire, or the authority to do it. And so our recommendation would be to allow it to sunset and go ahead, I believe, in 1st of August, or that August billing cycle. Is that right, Nikki?
Yes.
That it would go on, the residential charge at $6 would go on. It's cost us about $150,000 when you look at it from that perspective. And then there won't be additional legislation because we've already passed it, but this
Right.
will also enable us to have the money to do what we've been calling phase 4 in the stormwater rebuild on that east side, that area that's real low in town. So what we would do if we reinstitute that is we would go ahead and get both phase 3 and phase 4 ready to bid. Both those projects have a lot of Ohio Public Works Commission grant and loans in them, but each one will have a portion that will come out of our local rate base. So if we sunset the rate holiday, then I think that I feel comfortable to go ahead and follow through on what council previously authorized, which was the preparing of plans and ready to bid phase 4 stormwater. So that's most of it, isn't it, Nikki, or all of it?
Yep, that's it. I think the other thing that came up today when I was talking with the utility office was the 6-month payment plan has gone pretty well. We've gotten a lot of people signed up, but I think perhaps with this billing period, we're going to go back to the old way of doing business because everyone who needed that extra time at this point has signed up for that. So I think we're looking at going back to the late fees being added on and to the 3-month instead of the 6-month payment plan.
That sounds fair to me.
Yeah, I think last month we had over 500 disconnect notices that went out. This month it was just right around 100. So very, very significantly down from where we were. So people have been paying, they've been paying on time. Like Tom said before, we're really grateful that people have been paying their bills. So I think most are back on track where they need to be.
Yeah, for instance, this month, the end of the month, we collected 107%, or did it go to 110? Between 107 and 110% of what we billed. So that is people making payments on their back balances and then setting up payment arrangements. So we will likely see in the 400, most all of those will pay that made payment arrangements. And we'll likely see a chance to have our collections a little more than our billings until those customers get those back months paid off.
And we,
Frankly,
as of today,
of them to go on the no, if we want to do a no shut off this winter like we have in the last 5 years, then we'll start to see some of those same customers fall into the delinquent or the slow pay range. But anyway,
the summer crisis started up again. As of today, summer crisis money is available. So I think we'll start seeing a little bit roll in again from community action.
yeah, I went over there this afternoon to talk. Someone, the door was locked. So maybe they gave away all the summer crisis money and they're out of business. But no, that's really a good point. I think the people who are dependent on community action or other charities and the JFS, that they're familiar with that. So I guess that the collections were real good in May, and but if we continue to shortchange the stormwater fund, then we're gonna see we're just gonna have to start pushing off those capital projects, those really east side stormwater. It's not even improvements, almost installation of actual modern stormwater. Something that I know the council's been real supportive in the past. So anyways, we're recommending that we go ahead and allow the stormwater holiday to end. And so I'm sure we'll get some feedback between now and the end of the month, and we can all gauge that. And if council wants to pass an ordinance that extends it, it's certainly not the end of the world, but it will squeeze us on revenue into stormwater. So that's that. There's no legislation exactly.
I think we can, this is Tom Fellner, maybe discuss that at the next council meeting, just in, not as a resolution or another ordinance, but discuss it. I'm in favor of letting it sunset, and I agree with Ms. Ward about return to the policy. I think it's worked well. You guys have worked hard developing it and implementing it. So
I can put that as a discussion item under other at the bottom for you guys,
That's
like
great.
I've done before. Okay.
Okay, now we'll go to Nikki for the sewer rate study.
Not much to say on this other than it's essentially what we did with the water rates, same company, same process for them to do a financial projection. They don't call it a rate study, it's a financial projection. So we would end up with a product much like the water projection that they provided back in May.
Okay, I got a question, Nikki.
Yes.
If they don't call it a rate study, do they still take into account what we bring in, what we go out, what we have in debt?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Mark, I sent them dozens of pages of information. Yes, they take from the state auditor's site. So it's a really extensive study. They just call it a financial projection because I don't know their terminology. A rate study means something different and more like $25,000. But this $9,000 financial projection really shows us where we need to go. As we saw with what she produced for the water rates, if you do this, this is where you'll end up. If you don't do this, so this will be the exact same finished product.
Okay, thank you. I think we should go ahead and do can't call it a rate study.
Financial projections are.
Financial projection. Thanks, Nikki.
Yep. And so what we'll do is next week when Board of Control meets, we'll approve signing that agreement with them. And then I'll give her the go ahead and get her the information she needs to get rolling on it.
It'll be funded out of the wastewater treatment plant.
601.
And like Nikki said, we'll just pass it through Board of Control. But I wanted to make sure that if we went ahead and commissioned it, that when it came back, that the committee would use that as your base document to decide what kind of, if any, sewer increase and when you'd want to put that on the agenda. That's councilmatic. And I think the only urgency is that I probably makes sense to do water and sewer either at the same time or about the same time. Council action and then service director action on the water rates. So.
Yeah, this is Tom Fellner. I'd like to encourage Ms. Ward to go ahead and get that done. Maybe we could socialize both studies.
You're funny, Doc.
I heard that. I kind of cringed. I thought, oh, because he is really you could get a sense Ryan's really he's a wire nerd, just like he said.
I'm kidding, Facebook friends. I'm just teasing. Bad joke.
He's good enough. He's a good guy, man. He's taught us a lot. Really, they brought that idea of AMP-T to us. So if it works out, it's maybe it'll thaw some of that or eliminate some of that blind spot that some of our residents have about AMP. They're more of a neutral than some sort of enemy or savior of the community. They're kind of a neutral entity that we decide how we want them to function. So anyway.
Mike, do you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to with both and Dr. Fellner, I think, to have Nikki go ahead with this.
Do we need to take this to full council or can the committee okay to do this?
Yeah,
I can go ahead with it, Mark. It's administrative, so I can, and it's under $50,000.
Okay.
Oh, hello.
Which kitty was that?
That's a motion to adjourn, I think.
Okay. Do we have any other business? Next meeting, time and date, August 5, 7 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Good night,
meeting
everyone.
adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
ya.